Have you ever felt the weight of a loss that reshapes everything inside you? Have you wondered how a heart stays firm when its greatest supporters are taken away one after another? Loss visits every human life, yet the way one responds reveals the strength that lies within. For the early Muslims, hardship came in many forms, but nothing compared to the personal sorrow faced by the Prophet ﷺ during this period. In the last episode, we saw how the boycott strained the believers. Hunger, fear, and isolation tried to break their spirit, yet their patience and unity turned a time of deprivation into a testimony of unwavering faith. The companions radiallahu anhu walked through those years with courage, supporting one another and holding firmly to the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. In this episode, the struggle takes a different form. The external pressure of Quraysh slowly gives way to an internal trial. Our Prophet ﷺ is faced with profound personal loss, marking a year that would shape the emotional landscape of his mission. This is the year of sorrow, where patience, love, and resilience come together in the most human moments of his life. As the boycott finally came to an end, the believers stepped back into the city with weary steps but steady hearts. They had endured years of scarcity and isolation, yet their commitment to Allah had only grown stronger. The Prophet ﷺ guided them back into normal life with gentleness, helping them rebuild their routines and regain their strength. But beneath the relief, the toll of the boycott was clear. Many families had suffered from severe hunger. Some elders returned home with weakened bodies. Children experienced the hardship of the boycott along with their families, sharing in the hunger and uncertainty of those years. The companions radiallahu anhu supported one another, offering whatever comfort they could as they slowly returned to their work, worship, and community life. The Prophet ﷺ looked upon his people with deep compassion. He had carried their pain throughout the boycott, visiting families, comforting the fearful, and encouraging the weary. The boycott ended when several men from Quraysh finally spoke out against the injustice. They went to the Kaaba intending to tear down the written pact. When they reached it, they discovered that insects had eaten most of the pact, and only the portion mentioning the name of Allah remained. With the pact ruined and public pressure rising, the agreement collapsed and the families were released. Once the families returned to Mecca and the restrictions were lifted, the Prophet continued to comfort them and guide their hearts as they recovered from the hardship. His leadership was not built on authority alone, but on caring for hearts at their most fragile moments. The Quraysh observed the believers with mixed emotions. Some were surprised that their harsh measures had not weakened the resolve of the Muslims. Others grew frustrated that isolation had not stopped the message from spreading. Despite the outward calm, tensions remained beneath the surface. Through all of this, the Prophet ﷺ continued to guide with wisdom and patience, knowing that the challenges facing the believers were not yet over. As life began to settle, there came a quiet shift within the Prophet's household. Abu Talib, who had protected the Prophet since childhood, grew increasingly weak. Age and the hardships he endured over the years weakened his body, and his health visibly declined. His decline marked the approaching end of a period in which he had protected and supported the Prophet faithfully in the courts of Quraysh, shielded him from hostility, and stood firm even when society pressured him to withdraw his protection. His presence had been one of the greatest reasons the enemies of Islam had not dared to harm the Prophet directly. The Prophet remained by his side, showing care and respect for his uncle during his illness. He remembered his uncle's protection and loyalty, offering comfort to him in his final days. The Quraysh saw an opportunity in his weakening state and intensified their efforts, hoping he would abandon the Prophet. Yet Abu Talib remained steadfast, refusing to betray the trust he had upheld for so many years. The companions knew the future would be far more challenging without Abu Talib's protection. His home had been a place of safety, his influence a shield, and his loyalty a force that held back the hostility of Quraysh. Eventually, Abu Talib's strength gave way, and surrounded by family, he breathed his last. His life left a legacy of unwavering devotion to the Prophet he had raised as a son. The companions recognized that the hostility of Quraysh would now intensify, and the Prophet's mission would face even greater trials. The absence of Abu Talib removed a barrier that had long restrained aggression. The Prophet ﷺ faced this loss with patience and dignity. Even in sorrow, he remained aware that the challenges ahead required continued reliance on Allah. His heart grieved, but his trust in Allah remained unshaken. In enduring the loss, the Prophet exemplified that true perseverance comes from patience and devotion to the mission despite personal sorrow. Soon after the passing of Abu Talib, another loss approached, one that struck the deepest part of the Prophet's heart. Khadijah radiallahu anha, his beloved wife, companion, and supporter from the very beginning, became ill. Her life had been marked by extraordinary devotion. She had comforted him during the first revelation, reassured him when fear or uncertainty touched his heart, and used her wealth and influence to support the believers when they needed it most. During the boycott, she endured the hardship with patience and generosity, offering everything she had for the sake of Allah and His Messenger. As her strength faded, the Prophet ﷺ remained by her side, remembering every moment of kindness, every word of support, and every sacrifice she had made. Their partnership had shaped the earliest days of Islam, and her presence had been a constant source of encouragement. When Khadijah radiallahu anha passed away, the sorrow that filled the Prophet's home was immeasurable. This was not merely the loss of a spouse, it was the loss of a confidant, a supporter, and a source of comfort who had shared the most challenging moments of his mission. The companions radiallahu anhu grieved alongside the Prophet ﷺ, recognizing the deep support and guidance Khadijah radiallahu anha had provided during the early days of Islam. Her faith, generosity, and unwavering devotion left a lasting imprint on every believer. The Prophet ﷺ carried her memory with profound love, and his grief reflected the depth of their bond. Her legacy became a timeless example of courage, devotion, and sacrifice. With the passing of Abu Talib and Khadijah radiallahu anha, the Prophet ﷺ faced Mecca without the two greatest sources of support he had known since the earliest days of his mission. Their protection, counsel, and unwavering faith had been pillars that held back the hostility of Quraysh for decades. The Quraysh sensed this change and grew bolder. Insults became sharper, public mockery more frequent, and some individuals sought to intimidate the companions radiallahu anhu, hoping to weaken their resolve. The Prophet ﷺ met every act of hostility with calmness and dignity. He showed the believers that true strength is measured not by power or numbers, but by patience, reliance on Allah, and unwavering adherence to the truth. The companions drew closer together, protecting one another, offering encouragement, and continuing to convey the message of Islam with sincerity. Even in fear, they learned from the Prophet's composure and courage how to remain steadfast in their faith. Recognizing the need for support beyond Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ traveled to nearby tribes and communities. He invited them to the worship of Allah with gentleness and clarity, offering the message of Islam as a path of guidance and compassion rather than confrontation. Every journey carried risk, because without Abu Talib's protection, even a simple invitation to faith could provoke hostility. Despite the dangers, the Prophet remained patient and never responded with anger, demonstrating that guidance comes from Allah and that perseverance is essential even when the path is difficult. The companions observed his resilience and drew strength from his example. Each calm response to insult and every act of courage deepened their understanding of patience as not only endurance but trust in Allah. The courage to act rightly, and the determination to remain devoted under pressure. The year of sorrow tested them all. The grief of losing loved ones, the isolation, and the growing opposition could have crushed their spirit. Instead, these hardships became lessons in moral courage, reflection, and steadfast faith. The believers learned that even in moments of loss and adversity, Allah's guidance sustains those who remain devoted to Him. Through these trials, the early Muslim community grew stronger. Their patience, unity, and devotion laid the foundation for Islam to endure and spread, showing that hardship is not the end, but an opportunity to draw closer to Allah and strengthen the bonds of faith. The year of sorrow tested the Prophet ﷺ in ways that touched the deepest part of the human heart. He lost the uncle who protected him and the wife who comforted him, yet his faith never wavered. Through every loss, he carried patience, compassion, and trust in Allah. The companions radiallahu anhu learned from his example that resilience is not the absence of pain. It is the ability to remain steady through it, to keep moving forward with sincerity and purpose even when the heart feels heavy. These moments, painful as they were, shaped the foundation of the Muslim community. They revealed the profound strength of their Prophet, preparing them for a turning point that would lift the mission to new heights. In the next episode, we will follow the Prophet ﷺ as he steps beyond the boundaries of Mecca, carrying his message to a new city in search of support. What unfolds there becomes one of the most painful yet defining moments of his mission, revealing how unwavering his mercy and hope truly were. The path ahead is harsh, but his heart remains steady. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Stay with us as we continue uncovering the life and legacy of our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. May Allah guide our hearts to patience, sincerity, and courage in all trials.